Hello, everyone, and welcome to Internet Law Review. For today's story, we are covering the unexpected statement from Robert Mueller's office, detailing controversy over a recent Buzzfeed article that alleged that Trump had induced someone to lie under oath. Robert Mueller is the special counsel who has been appointed to investigate whether any foreign government, specifically Russia, has improperly influenced the US elections. And this has looked into any activities from any candidate for office or their campaign with respect to unintentional or perhaps even intentional cooperation with the Russian government to influence that election. Robert Mueller has been investigating this for almost 2 years now and has already indicted and convicted several people for offenses relating to this incident. However, Robert Mueller's office has issued almost no statements in terms of PR since the election has begun. Robert Mueller's office is somewhat well known for its tight-lipped attitude, and it just simply does not leak, unlike so many institutions does. So when Robert Mueller issues a public statement through its PR office, that is an unexpected event. So let's see what happened, and let's try to interpret what Robert Mueller is actually trying to say. So first, the underlying controversy. As this article from Deadline.com notes, Buzzfeed had written an article citing two unnamed law enforcement officials that Trump had told Michael Cohen to lie under oath about negotiations with Russia to build a tower in Moscow. This, if true, would be blatantly illegal. Many things that Trump has been accused of to date could arguably be not illegal at all. This has to do a lot with the unitary theory of the executive, which we don't really have time to get into in depth. But there are credible legal arguments that the various things that Trump has been accused of doing up to this point are not illegal. But this doesn't apply here. I can think of no cogent argument that can be made that if this story were true, that Trump is not guilty of a crime. You, as you might imagine, cannot counsel someone to lie under oath. That is obstruction of justice, it is accessory and conspiracy for perjury, and there are probably some other offenses beyond that as well. And I can think of no argument that this, if true, would make it okay for Trump to do this. So this was the biggest bombshell related to the Trump investigation so far, because it is the one accusation that has been made so far that, if true, there would be no legal defense in terms of it's not actually a crime. That would have been arguably true for everything up to this point, but it would not be true for this. Counseling someone to commit perjury is unabashedly a felony. So everyone was very interested in this Buzzfeed article, and we have heard politicians arguing that this should be the basis for a congressional investigation and/or impeachment hearings. And I think largely because of that political uptake, Robert Mueller decided that he needed to issue a statement clarifying the record to make sure that people were not acting in a way that was inappropriate. So Robert Mueller's office has said, quote, Buzzfeed's descriptions of specific statements to the special counsel's office and characterization of documents and testimony obtained by this office regarding Michael Cohen's congressional testimony are not accurate. So let's interpret this and try to understand what Robert Mueller might be saying. So there are two ways to parse this statement, in my view. We have to look at the word of are not accurate. That is pretty much the critical piece of this statement. So how do you interpret are not accurate? One way is to interpret it as are not accurate. If you interpret it that way, then you can look at this as simply saying that BuzzFeed in the reporting has made some kind of factual mistake or some kind of logical error. We're not going to tell you what it is, but they've made some kind of mistake along the way. So if you read it that way, you could still say, well, the bulk of the BuzzFeed article is correct. Robert Mueller is simply saying that there's some sort of technical aspect to this that's wrong, but the overall theme, the overall thrust of the article is correct. So while we should proceed with caution, the BuzzFeed article is still essentially correct, and we can proceed on that basis if you interpret it as are not accurate. The other way to interpret it, and to be frank, I think the correct way to interpret this, because Robert Mueller's office does not issue statements, and they're not going to issue a statement to simply say, oh, there's been a minor error. So if they're issuing a statement, there's a real problem. So I think the better way to interpret are not accurate is actually a euphemism to say this is blatantly manufactured and completely made up. I think the better way to interpret this is Robert Mueller trying to be discreet in saying the Buzzfeed article has absolutely no basis in reality whatsoever. And the reason I say that again is because Robert Mueller's office doesn't issue releases at all. They don't make statements at all. In the last 2 years, I can't think of another statement they've made through the PR. And if they have made one, then it's a very, very rare thing to occur for sure. So it seems unlikely, in my view, that Robert Mueller would break this tradition merely to say, okay, there's some small inaccuracies in this reporting. I think the better way to read this is Robert Mueller trying to signal, without blatantly saying so, that the BuzzFeed article is completely made up and has no basis in reality. So I have seen press reports that are trying to give this the saving construction under the first interpretation and trying to say, well, Robert Mueller simply said are not accurate, and he's a man who's precise in his words, so we can interpret that as it's literally said, and we can interpret that to mean the BuzzFeed article might have some small deficit, but is actually true. However, I think that this is not the correct interpretation. Robert Mueller is indeed precise in his words, but he's also discreet, and he's also very reluctant to say things in a public venue. So when Robert Mueller is going to say something in public, he's going to say it in a more covert way. And so you should interpret, in my view, are not accurate to say that the BuzzFeed descriptions are completely manufactured and have no basis in reality. So I hope this is helpful. So let me know what you think. Do you think I'm correct and that Robert Mueller is trying to subconsciously or trying to covertly signal that BuzzFeed is just making stuff up? Or do you think that a more charitable interpretation is plausible? Let me know what you think. Leave your comments. And as always, until later, my friends, cheers and goodbye.